The thing about the opioid crisis is it's never a static problem. It's,
Mhm.
well, it's really a chemical arms race playing out on the streets. It's constantly evolving, always looking for that next cheap, potent edge.
Exactly. For the past couple of years, the big fight for public health officials, for ERs, has been against xylazine.
Trank dope, yeah, we've all heard the term.
And just as we started to really get a handle on managing that specific adulterant, the whole threat landscape, it shifted again. It didn't just change, it has escalated dramatically.
It really has. We've been poring over the latest research, the newest reports, and they're all detailing this rapid, almost silent surge of medetomidine in the illicit drug supply. And this stuff, it's fundamentally changing what a severe drug withdrawal even looks like in hospitals across the U.S.
And that's really the core of this deep dive today. Our mission is to unpack the sources that are tracking medetomidine's rise, to figure out why it is so much more dangerous than xylazine.
And to look at this unique and truly life-threatening withdrawal syndrome it causes.
Right. And then what are the new intensive medical protocols that are required to even treat it?
And just to set the stakes for you right away, medetomidine, or MDT, it's a powerful synthetic alpha-2 adrenergic receptor agonist.
It's a veterinary tranquilizer. It was never, ever approved for human use, and now it's being mixed with fentanyl.
And its presence is being directly linked to a rise in fatalities and, critically, hospitalizations that are skipping the general ward entirely.
They go straight to the intensive care unit, straight to the ICU.
Okay, so to understand how we got here, how medetomidine became the new threat, we really have to look at xylazine.
We do. It's a classic case of unintended consequences from regulatory efforts. Law enforcement and public health agencies, they responded to the xylazine threat.
And the illicit market just pivoted.
Yeah.
Instantly.
The data on that pivot is chillingly precise. When states like Pennsylvania moved to schedule xylazine, right, they made it a Schedule III drug.
Which you'd think would solve the problem.
You would. And we saw an immediate measurable effect. I mean, reports show that xylazine prevalence in drug samples there dropped from a staggering 97% all the way down to 42%.
On paper, that looks like a huge win, a major public health victory.
But that void wasn't left empty, was it?
No, it was filled with something exponentially more dangerous.
That's it, exactly. In the exact same 6-month period, medetomidine prevalence, it didn't just show up, it surged. It went from being found in 29% of samples all the way up to 87%.
So the illicit supply chain didn't quit the alpha-2 agonist class.
No, it just upgraded to a product that was unscheduled and, way, way more potent.
Let's get a handle on what that chemical upgrade really means. What is medetomidine, technically speaking?
So chemically, it's what's called a racemic mixture. The easiest way to think of it is like you have two mirror image molecules in the same bottle.
Right.
One is biologically inactive, that's levomedetomidine, but the other is the really powerful active component, dexmedetomidine.
And dexmedetomidine is used in hospitals, right?
It is. It's a powerful sedative used for complex human procedures, and since they're mixed in a 1-to-1 ratio in the illicit supply, using medetomidine is functionally the same as administering pure dexmedetomidine.
Okay, let's unpack this. This is not a simple swap, one tranquilizer for another. This is a massive leap in pharmacological power. You mentioned the potency difference is huge, but
Yeah.
how? How big of a leap are we talking about?
It's the difference between, say, a strong sleeping pill and pure pharmaceutical anesthesia. Metomidine is cited as being at least 100-fold more potent than xylazine.
100 times.
At least. Some sources even suggest it might be 200 or even 300-fold more potent, depending on the effect you're measuring.
100 times more potent. That's just staggering. To put that in perspective for you, if xylazine was a powerful whiskey, metomidine is like pure grain alcohol. Or maybe an industrial solvent.
It's like a good analogy, and that massive jump in efficacy completely changes the safety margin.
Or the total lack of one.
Right. It explains why the clinical consequences we're now seeing are so incredibly severe. A tiny, tiny difference in concentration can be the difference between sedation and a fatality, and this danger isn't localized anymore.
So where are we seeing this spread? It's not just a Northeast problem anymore, is it?
Not at all. The geographic footprint has just exploded. As of summer 2024, it's been confirmed in samples in at least 18 U.S. states and D.C.
Wow.
We're tracking confirmed clusters in major hubs like St. Louis, San Francisco, Chicago, Michigan, Virginia, and it's already crossed the border into Canada.
So it's following the exact same path as xylazine did.
The exact same geographical pattern started in the Northeast, and now it's just moving steadily south and west. It is a true nationwide threat now.
So when a first responder shows up, and they find someone who's taken fentanyl that's been cut with medetomidine.
Yeah.
What does that acute intoxication actually look like?
Well, initially, it looks alarmingly familiar. It looks a lot like a xylazine and fentanyl overdose. Because of the powerful depressant effects of the alpha-2 agonist, patients present with severe central nervous system depression. We're talking profound sedation, critically low blood pressure, severe bradycardia, which is a very slow heart rate, and bradypnea.
Dangerously slow breathing.
Right.
So in the field, the standard response is still naloxone for the opioid part. But we know this is a non-opioid, so what happens when medetomidine is in the mix?
Naloxone, while it's still life-saving, is only half the solution. It absolutely does not reverse the effects of medetomidine.
So what does it do?
The priority is to restore the patient's ability to breathe, and naloxone does that. It reverses the fentanyl's effects on respiration. But the patient will almost always remain deeply sedated. They stay obtunded because of medetomidines' powerful alpha-2 agonist effects.
And that distinction that the patient is breathing but still totally unconscious, that's a critical point for clinicians, isn't it? You can't just wait for them to wake up as a sign of recovery.
Absolutely. The clinical implication is enormous. Emergency management has to be titrated only to the patient's respiratory rate and their oxygen levels, not to whether they wake up.
And if you don't, if you just keep pushing naloxone.
If you aggressively dose naloxone trying to overcome that deep medetomidine sedation, you risk suddenly stripping away the opioid in an unstable patient. You precipitate a severe, life-threatening opioid withdrawal while they're still unconscious from the tranquilizer.
Which could lead to aspiration and all sorts of other complications.
Exactly.
So the goal is just stabilize the breathing, stabilize the blood pressure, and get them to a higher level of care immediately. What about that really slow heart rate it causes? Are there specific warnings in the sources about that?
There is a key warning about managing the bradycardia. Clinicians are advised to avoid giving atropine.
Which is the drug you'd normally use to speed up the heart.
Right. But the data shows medetomidine causes profound systemic vasoconstriction. The peripheral vessels are squeezed incredibly tight.
So if you speed up the heart while the pipes are clamped down,
You risk provoking a severe, potentially fatal hypertensive crisis. The best course is careful observation and supportive care if the patient is otherwise stable.
that requires a level of restraint and specific toxicological knowledge that is totally different from a standard opioid overdose. Just shows how fast the protocols have to change. And here's where it gets, really interesting and frankly terrifying for hospital resources. The withdrawal phase. This is where medetomidine creates a unique crisis.
It really is.
Unlike other things we've tracked, the withdrawal from MDT it's fundamentally different. It often requires immediate ICU admission.
The onset and the trajectory are just alarming. Withdrawal usually kicks in around 12 to 24 hours after the last use. But the patient's deterioration is explosive. We're talking rapid decompensation over maybe 1 or 2 hours.
And the consequence of that is this massive escalation of care. The reports from Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, they confirm this critical disruptive statistic. Approximately 90% of medetomidine withdrawal cases need treatment in the ICU.
That 90% figure, that is the single most important public health takeaway from all of this.
It has to be.
Traditional opioid withdrawal, even xylazine withdrawal, you can often manage that on a general medical floor. But requiring 9 out of 10 patients to occupy a highly specialized, incredibly expensive ICU bed, that's a substantial and, frankly, unsustainable drain on hospital capacity, on resources, on staffing.
It just shifts the entire triage model for overdose victims.
Yeah.
So let's dive into why it demands that level of care. You said there are 4 cardinal features that really distinguish this withdrawal.
Yes, 4 features that really paint a picture of a true sympathetic storm. The first is severe autonomic dysfunction. This is just marked, persistent, dangerous sympathetic hyperactivity.
So the body's fight-or-flight system is just stuck on full blast.
It's stuck in the on position, exactly.
What kind of numbers are we talking about here?
Dangerously high. We're seeing systolic blood pressures that are often maxed out between a 175 and 215, and heart rates frequently peaking around 130 to 155 beats per minute.
Those numbers are way beyond just uncomfortable. They're actively damaging organs. What kind of complications come from that kind of sustained, massive stress on the body?
You're right. The pressure is so high it can induce severe sequelae. We see reports of posterior reversible encephalopathy syndrome, or pre-ES.
Which is basically brain swelling, right?
Simply put, yes. Brain swelling caused by that severe acute spike in blood pressure. We also see non-ST elevation myocardial infarction and STEMI, secondary to demand ischemia.
So a heart attack.
Essentially, yes. A heart attack where the heart muscle is working so hard against that high blood pressure that it just outstrips its own oxygen supply.
Okay, so that's one. What's the second feature?
The second is refractory, copious vomiting. And this isn't just typical nausea. Patients have this severe, persistent vomiting that often fails to respond to common antiemetics like ondansetron.
Which creates a whole new set of problems.
Massive complications. The patient can't keep down vital oral medications. They risk aspiration pneumonia, which can lead to intubation. We've even seen reports of Mallory-Weiss tears.
Tears in the esophagus just from the force of the vomiting.
Exactly.
So that makes the treatment plan we're about to discuss incredibly difficult. If you can't get medicine in, you can't stabilize them.
Precisely. The third feature is encephalopathy or delirium. This is a profound altered mental status, but it often presents as hypoactive delirium.
Meaning the patient is confused, disoriented, maybe even unresponsive.
Yes. And finally, the fourth distinguishing feature is a distinctive tremor. This is a large amplitude tremor. Nurses have described it as whole-body rigors, and it often involves the jaw.
But there's a key diagnostic clue in there for doctors, right?
There is. Unlike seizure activity or other types of withdrawal, this tremor happens without clonus or hyperreflexia. It's a key physical marker that points directly toward medetomidine.
That sympathetic storm is clearly the engine driving that 90% ICU admission rate. Can you connect the dots for us on a neurochemical level? Why is this withdrawal so much more volatile than, say, xylazine withdrawal?
It really boils down to the receptor targets. We mentioned xylazine as an alpha-2 agonist, but it pretty much sticks to that target.
Okay.
Medetomidine, though, at the high toxic doses people are getting in the illicit supply, it becomes non-selective. It hits both the alpha-2 receptors and a second key target, the imidazoline receptors.
And why does hitting the imidazoline receptor suddenly turn the withdrawal into a full-blown crisis?
Well, when you remove a drug that's activating both of those systems at the same time, the body goes into a dual withdrawal state.
So it's withdrawing from the alpha-2 agonist and the imidazoline receptor agonist.
Correct. And the second withdrawal component, which is similar to what you might see with withdrawal from a muscle relaxer like tizanidine, is what we think triggers that profound, exaggerated sympathetic activation. The imidazoline receptors, in simple terms, they kind of control the brakes on your autonomic nervous system.
And when those brakes are suddenly released?
You get the runaway heart rate, the astronomical blood pressure, and that distinctive coarse tremor.
Given that we're dealing with this dual withdrawal that mimics a massive medical stress event, the old protocols are clearly useless. So what has emerged as the cornerstone of treatment for this severe withdrawal syndrome?
Ironically, the cornerstone of care is a continuous 5e infusion of dexmedetomidine itself.
The active ingredient of the drug they took?
The active enantiomer, yes. We're treating the severe withdrawal with the therapeutic drug, but in a very controlled hospital environment. And they often need very high doses, up to 1.5 micrograms per kilogram per hour.
For how long?
Patients typically need this infusion to stabilize for between 1 to 5 full days.
The length of that treatment alone just points to how resource-intensive this is. How are medical teams managing the other symptoms, like that insane vomiting and the extreme hypertension?
Well, since keeping anything down orally is nearly impossible, the management relies on scheduled 5e medications. For the nausea and agitation, scheduled 4V prochlorperazine and IV olanzapine are preferred.
Because the usual go-to, ondansetron, doesn't work.
It's frequently ineffective, yeah. And for the persistent, severe hypertension that just won't break, even with the alpha-2 agonists, they often need titratable antihypertensive infusions. Something like nicardipine, where you're constantly adjusting the dose to get that blood pressure below the critical threshold of 180 over 120.
To protect the brain and the heart from those catastrophic complications we talked about, like PREs and angina.
Exactly.
So that sounds like days spent in the ICU being carefully managed with these powerful drips. What happens when the patient finally stabilizes enough to step down?
That's the oral step-down phase. They transition to high doses of oral clonidine, which is a similar but less potent alpha-2 agonist. And we're talking doses often between 0.3 to 0.5 milligrams every 6 hours, sometimes even higher.
Why so high?
Because their receptors have just been chronically saturated by the illicit drug, so a resistance builds up. It requires these massive therapeutic doses to have an effect. Tizanidine can also be used as an adjunct, specifically to help with that imidazoline receptor component.
To help turn off what's left of that sympathetic storm.
That's the goal.
You know, before we move on, the demographic data we looked at showed this fascinating and really contrasting geographical split in the cases.
It really does. It just underscores how varied the supply chains and the user demographics are. In the cases that were reported out of Chicago, the patients were predominantly Black or African
This
American.
is 73% of cases.
Right. And they tended to be older, with the bulk of the population aged 45 to 64.
And now compare that to the cases coming out of Pennsylvania, Philly, and Pittsburgh.
There, the profile just shifted dramatically. The patients were predominantly non-Hispanic white, ranging from 62 to 80% of cases, and they were significantly younger. The mean age was 34.
Wow. I mean, that's a profound split. Does the data give us any clues as to why there's such a huge difference? Are we looking at totally different supply routes or different patterns of use?
The sources don't give a definitive why, but the contrast suggests highly localized distribution channels. You know, the older demographic in Chicago might reflect a population with longer, more established use habits who are now being exposed to this new contaminant.
Through an established supply network.
Right. And the younger profile in Pennsylvania might indicate that metomidine is entering a newer, maybe an evolving supply chain over there. It really means this is not a one-size-fits-all crisis. Local public health responses have to recognize these demographic differences.
Okay, finally, let's talk about the single biggest barrier to early detection, the diagnostic gap. If the clinical presentation is this complicated, how do hospitals even know what they're treating?
That is the single biggest public health obstacle right now. Metomidine is not included in standard hospital toxicology panels.
So you can't just run a urine screen and get an answer.
You can't. And what's more, unlike with xylazine, rapid test strips for this are not yet widely available.
Yeah, so what does that leave doctors with?
It forces the diagnosis to rely almost entirely on clinical recognition. The doctor has to see that unique pattern, the profound sympathetic dysfunction, the crazy hypertension, the refractory vomiting, that strange non-clonic tremor, and guess correctly.
And what about confirmation?
Confirmatory testing requires time-consuming advanced methods like liquid chromatography mass spectrometry, which are often not available in real time. By the time a confirmation comes back, the patient might have already spent 2 days in the ICU.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? We started by saying medetomidine is a chemical upgrade, and the sources absolutely prove that. It's so much more than a simple substitute for xylazine. It introduces a new toxicological profile that requires a completely different and far more resource-intensive level of medical care.
And that key takeaway you can't forget is the immense burden. 90% of withdrawal cases suddenly requiring an ICU bed.
That's the whole ballgame.
It is. And it mandates rapid, coordinated public health action. We need to enhance surveillance systems, like the National Drug Early Warning System, to detect these shifts faster. More importantly, we need standardized, evidence-based treatment protocols implemented nationwide because this is spreading and it's spreading fast.
And there was one final sobering point from the data.
Yeah. Because the withdrawal involves such severe refractory vomiting and this encephalopathy, giving people oral medication is incredibly challenging. So even after they leave the ICU, many patients leave against medical advice before they're fully stable.
And the numbers on that were high.
Reports indicate a patient-directed discharge rate as high as 32% in Philadelphia, and that high rate of people leaving early creates these severe public health concerns about immediate relapse and increased fatality once they leave the controlled hospital environment.
It just creates this frightening feedback loop. We know the scheduling of xylazine inadvertently accelerated the spread of metomidine, a compound that's 100 to 300 times more potent, which raises a crucial, provocative question for you to think about this week. As law enforcement and public health agencies respond to metomidine, how quickly will the illicit drug supply just pivot again to the next highly potent chemical? And what kind of medical capacity will that demand from our hospitals and health systems?
It's the constant race between regulation and chemical evolution, and right now, it feels like the chemicals are winning.
Indeed. We appreciate you diving deep with us. We'll see you next time.